So a common take in fighting game discourse is that fighting games are getting too simple. Fighting games are being simplified. This comes up every new release, but in Street Fighter 6 specifically, it was a really big deal because of modern controls. Modern controls are kind of interesting because you don't get your whole character's movesets, but you potentially can have some really good upsides, mostly around reacting, because Street Fighter is kind of a reactionary game. I wanted to look at the way different fighting games that I've played at least have attempted to simplify games, because fighting game developers have a kind of like a toolkit they use of things they use to simplify controls specifically. Why does this matter? In my opinion, it doesn't matter. That's why I want to talk about it. There's some fighting games that are currently loved by people that have done things to simplify the controls. It's just that over time, people have figured stuff about characters, figured out stuff about the system, that lo and behold, the game ends up being like a pretty hard game despite how the controls are. Strive gets a bad rap sometimes for having like simplified versions of moves from previous games, especially in the inputs. ArcSys has been kind of doing that for a while. So Persona, for example, every special move is a quarter circle in this game with very few exceptions. My old Persona 4 Arena 1 main Mitsuru is one of them because she's a charged character. Everyone in this game, their moves are all quarter circles, and at most you'll have to do a double quarter circle to do a super. Everything for Yukari, for example, is quarter circles, follow-ups. Her instant kill is down, 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 and everyone's Dragon Punch is not a motion, it's two buttons, the B and the D button. Dragon Ball also used this idea, so everything in that game is quarter circles or downs. Like all the inputs for the game are really simple. Actually, I was gonna go like, but like they're actually like truly simple. Guilty Gear still has like half circle back forward, half circles, DP motions. The main things that I saw that were changed are moves like my main Baiken, for example, has Yozan-sen, which used to be a forward, down, down, forward, and they changed it to quarter circle. I think because you have to do them in the air, so they wanted it to be easier to perform. To do Dragon Punch motion immediately off the ground, there is an easy trick to do it, but it's not easy to do in Strive, surprisingly, that way, so that makes sense. Next, I want to talk about input buffers. So the input buffer is how long the game will accept your inputs. If you ever wonder how like people hit confirm certain things so quickly, like off one button, for example, it's usually because of the input buffer. They're taking advantage of the input buffer by doing an input early, and then if the move connects, the next input comes out. If the move doesn't connect, the next move doesn't come out. It's why I constantly say while I'm streaming, hey, this person's inputs are sloppy, or hey, my inputs are sloppy, because I'm reminding myself, hey, you have to make sure you buffer everything properly so that you're not left vulnerable when you whiff attacks. Now that being said though, the amount of time a fighting game can take to hold your inputs can vary a lot by game. So the game I want to use as an example today is actually Guilty Gear Xrd, which might be a weird one. It has a pretty tight buffer. I believe it's like a 3-frame buffer, but actually when this game came out, this is in 2014, Xrd pretty much was like a reset of XX. So the game is supposed to be like based off Guilty Gear XX Sharp Reload, sort of how like Street Fighter 4 was based off Street Fighter 2, like that type of concept. One of the things they did is that the buffer was insanely tight, but players didn't really complain about it. It was just what they were used to. The problem was actually when the game got to home consoles. So once it got to home consoles and people were trying to play online with good old delay-based netcode, the combination of the delay-based netcode plus the insanely tight buffer made it really hard for people to execute, and ArcSys released a patch pretty early in the game. I want to say like 2 or 3 months after the game came out, adding more of an input buffer to things. So it's just easier to input stuff in Xrd compared to XX, despite them being similar-ish games. So while Guilty Gear is on like the tight end, the other extreme would be a game like, say, Smash Ultimate or something. I believe Smash Ultimate has like a 10-frame buffer. So when I was playing that game, I played for a couple months. The buffer is so big that I shouldn't say you, because you might not have this problem. I definitely had this problem. I would do stuff that I didn't want to do. That's why you don't want a buffer to be too big, because the game is storing your inputs, right? Small buffer, the downside is the game won't store your inputs for a long time, But the upside is once you get used to it, the game feels pretty crisp. It just takes a little while to get used to. A lot of older games have small buffers. A lot of newer games have bigger buffers. This is a general rule. So the buffer really does actually affect the feel of the game though. If the buffer is too big for somebody or too small for somebody, it'll almost feel like you're fighting the game. So this one is really, really important. And generally, as time has gone on, they make the buffers for everything bigger. So another thing they do, but this one is pretty uncommon, it's something called advanced input. So I always use BlazBlue as an example because that's the first time I have seen this, but apparently KOF has had this mechanic for a very, very long time for special moves. So the idea is it's similar to like the concept of an input buffer, but specifically in BlazBlue, when you hold a button, it'll repeat your input for 5 frames. So remember that story I told you about Guilty Gear Xrd? In my opinion, it seems like they were ready for this in BlazBlue because BlazBlue came out in 2009, the original BlazBlue, where Xrd came out in like 2014, like the end of 2014 on consoles. It seems like when BlazBlue was made, they were thinking about online because they had this mechanic already. And I believe when BlazBlue came out, rollback netcode was not like invented yet. I don't think it was the first like final version of GGPO was finished until like 2011 or something. If you know anybody who's played like old BlazBlue, everyone said the netcode was pretty good despite it being like delay based because of this thing. So it really, really helps with combos because you can just press buttons really early and it'll come out. It helps with links and things like that. And in this game, it applies to just buttons in general. So it helps a lot with links. When the game came out, it was actually one of the things that older players gave the game flack for. It made links too easy. But of course, if you ever watch BlazBlue or if you hear anyone talk about modern BlazBlue, they talk about how hard the combos are. In my opinion, it's how hard you make them. So it's like what you choose to go for, but it doesn't change the fact that you can still like miss stuff. This game has a lot of dashing combos that you can't use the advanced input for. It's basically how hard you want it to be, but this mechanic really helps out with combos. And while we're on BlazBlue, we could talk about stylish. So a couple of fighting games have this. Honestly, stylish is modern controls, is the same type of idea. It's a overall simplified control scheme where you don't necessarily have access to all of your moves. The devs pick what button does what and what leads to what specifically. Think of it like as an automatic car versus like a manual transmission car. So for example here, I have player 1 as stylish Valkenine and player 2 as normal Valkenine. I will say I feel like in older BlazBlues, it was more obvious that characters were in stylish mode. In this game, it's just like, oh, their name's green, that's all you get. So if you don't know, you just be like, why is his name green? I was like, why is his name green? Just now. Anyway, so I picked Valkenine because I actually played stylish Valkenine before I mained him in Chrono Phantasma. In CS2, I played stylish Valkenine just like for fun. I believe that stylish for BlazBlue changes depending on the game you're playing. So in this game, I want to say it's kind of good. You have his whole moveset, but when you hit somebody, you can like auto combo them. So if you just mash like any button, you'll get button super or button special move depending on whether or not you're crouching. And they have pre-built combos for everything, even jump in. So button super, it just does its best to do like a short pre-made combo. But in prior versions, there was a straight up different control scheme where one button was attacking, one button was special move. How a fighting game treats their simplified controls really varies on the game. So surprisingly, this method is not that common. Think about the logic, right? If you go this method of having like a super simplified version of the controls as an option, so yes, it's an option in the game, but if you're targeting it at new people, eventually, if they are going to learn the game for real, they'd have to learn like the real controls to access all the mechanics, all the attacks, things like that. So this isn't actually like a common way of going about things. From what I've seen, most developers would rather go with the entire game's inputs being simplified, a la Persona, a la Dragon Ball, a la Mortal Kombat. It's one that people don't talk about, but Mortal Kombat has very simple inputs for special moves in comparison to other fighting games, rather than having this like technical option and then like modern or stylish or whatever option. In Street Fighter's case, I think modern is specifically in the discussion because of all the reactionary advantages. So like if there's not even any advantage to playing it, just like, oh, you can mash out a combo, then I'm sort of on the side too that like the technical versus stylish is Like, I don't think there's a point. Like, you could just have like an auto combo system. Like, a lot of games have auto combo, which for BlazBlue Central Fiction, it basically has that system. Like, this is just auto combo of pressing a button and it goes into like a special move or super on hit. And again, while we're on BlazBlue, we could talk about games having straight up less buttons. So this is a classic. They're making games easier complaint. You might be surprised depending on what game you're from. If you're, I mean, even as far as like platform fighters like Smash or something, there was a time where, since Street Fighter is like a 6-button game, so you have 3 punches, light, medium, heavy, and then 3 kicks, light, medium, heavy. That games that had less buttons, they're like, this game's too easy, there's not enough buttons. BlazBlue League here is the epitome of that. I'll never forget that fateful day where someone told me the reason why they don't play BlazBlue is because there's not enough buttons. It's missing buttons. I think this is kind of weird to say, like, this is why the game's easy, because you don't know what those buttons are going to do. You don't know what the character's abilities are, things like that. The logic is just less buttons, less movement for your hands, I guess. This one was always crazy to me, but I do list it because I've heard it said about BlazBlue. I've heard it said about Persona. According to like Capcom people from my region, they said this as far back as Marvel vs. Capcom 2, because I think that was like the first Marvel game that was 4 buttons. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. So the last one we gotta talk about is 1-button special moves, bringing us all the way back to Street Fighter 6. But it's not just Street Fighter 6. Granblue Fantasy Versus had this. Rising Thunder ... has this. I believe Power Rangers Battle for the Grid has this. Importantly, Project L has this, and I have footage of the game, just like uncut footage of the game on my channel that I uploaded a week or 2 ago. What is the concept? So the idea is that there's an option in the game somehow to be able to do special moves with 1 button. In Street Fighter 6, it's on modern controls, right? So if you play like Cammy, you can just press forward plus special and you do a DP. In Granblue Fantasy Versus, you can either do your Dragon Punch manually, which the reward is like no cooldown, because special moves have cooldowns in this game, like in the cell phone game. Or you can choose to do them with special move button, and if you do, there's a more significant cooldown. But the trade-off is more cooldown, but reaction DPs, like modern controls SF6. And then for the last examples, like Project L, the game is just made with that in mind. Like, all the special moves are with 1 button, and it doesn't matter. You can't do quarter circles, whatever. So why is this a big deal? So once you start getting into this territory, the thing is that motion inputs are used to like balance certain special moves. So one tactic I used long time ago at this point is in Melty Blood. Melty Blood has a very big input buffer. I play a character of command grab, a bunch of command grabs in Melty Blood, and in the back input, so like Kishima Koma has quarter circle back, Kohaku has half circle back. A lot of command grabs in Guilty Gear, especially like older Guilty Gear games, and supers, they usually end in forward, so they're like half circle back, forward. Why do they do this? The reason why is so that you can't run up and do the half circle back or quarter circle back, block for a second to block reversals, and then grab them. You have to sort of commit to doing the grab. Not only does the input kind of make sense, like if your grab was something where you're pulling them at you, it would make sense, but a lot of like command grabs, they reach out, so it kind of has that like tactile feel as well. Similarly with Dragon Punches have no blocking inputs in there, so you have an old school Dragon Punch input like Catalina does. It's forward, down, forward. All of these mean you cannot block. So what more advanced players tend to do is they'll do forward, down, forward, and end their input on and back. So they'll do something like this, and you'll still get the input, but your last input is on block. The rest is you have to do the input properly. So it becomes harder to like balance certain moves. So when Persona came out, people really got angry at the fact that all the Dragon Punches were done with buttons, because their complaint was you could sit there and just slam on the button, which, I mean, it's true, you could just slam on DP, but there was also counterplay to a lot of the Dragon Punches, making them with some you could jump over, some you could crouch under. Some characters had counters, some characters had grabs. So like there's a lot of different types of Dragon Punches in that game. So I think the trickiest balance is when you have both classic style special moves and 1 button special moves. So for a game like Project L, since they're building it from the beginning to have 1 button special moves, it shouldn't really be that hard for them to like balance it. So for example, an invincible move should be on like a neutral or forward so that you can't mash it while you're blocking. But when you have the option, it gets kind of tricky. Usually people are really concerned about like invincible moves with this because it truly becomes all like so much easier to react to things when you don't have to do the full motion. It becomes incredibly strong. The funny thing is too is that it seems to be a thing mostly in games that have restricted movement. Like the two ones that stand out the most to me are Street Fighter and Granblue. So Granblue Fantasy Rising, they changed all the special moves to one button specials, and I found that, and many other people found it very odd. I mean, it's their game and the game's just gonna shake out like however it's gonna shake out, but I definitely felt like they had a really good system this game. If you do the classic way, you get no cooldowns or little cooldowns, and if you use a special move button, you get like a cooldown. Even then, the cooldown becomes negligible for something like that. Like if you're jumping in at me and I use a reaction DP, like it comes back in about a second. Like after a little bit of offense, it would be back already. So I feel like that's their logic for the new Granblue Fantasy versus game of like, oh, there's not a lot of cooldowns, so why not just make everything one button special moves? I think it's really tricky in Street Fighter because you have kind of like a technical versus stylish option in the game. I think it's a really tricky thing to balance. And to be honest, out of all the stuff I listed, I think this one is the one that I think has the most impact. But again, I think it's only a big issue when you have both things in one game. If a game is only has simple inputs like Project L or like the new Granblue, I don't think it's really worth talking about as like, oh, they're making all the games easier and stuff like that, and people are just gonna play the game for what it is. But when you have the option between the two, it becomes pretty tough, I think, to balance both. So I'm really interested in seeing how Street Fighter 6 ends up growing over the coming years, because at this point it's only been out for like 3 months. But yeah, that's a look at how games are getting easier to input in. And it's funny, like I said at the beginning, almost every fighting game goes through a period where people are saying it's too easy to do stuff in this game. It's one of the many complaints a new fighting game gets. But I think it was kind of interesting to look at all the stuff that devs do to make it easier to just control your character in a game. Many of these have been done in multiple games too, so it's definitely something they're thinking about all the time. And to be honest, like I don't really mind. Like it should be possible to like control your character. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.